Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a truly fascinating piece of history that directly impacts the global economy we're all living in right now. We are tracking the century-long evolution of China's open-door policy. And, as you might notice from our somewhat chaotic macaroni art theme today, there's a reason for that, I promise. Historically speaking, the open-door policy is kind of like a double-sided coin. On one side, it literally began as a tool for foreign dominance. But flip it over, it has evolved into China's ultimate blueprint for modern superpower status.
Okay, let's dive into this, because it's wild just how radically the definition of this policy has flipped over the last century. Back in 1899, the open-door policy was actually an American diplomatic maneuver. It was designed to guarantee Western access to Chinese markets. But fast forward to 1978, and that exact same phrase, an open door, became China's very own domestic strategy to transform itself into a global heavyweight. How does a policy go from being a symbol of foreign intervention to, frankly, a masterclass in domestic strategy? Well, that's exactly the story we're decoding today.
To make sense of all this, we're going to break our explainer down into a chronological journey through three distinct historical eras, and then look at a fascinating modern role reversal. So we've got 1. The first opening in 1899, 2. The Deng Revolution in 1978, 3. The third wave in 2026, and 4. The 2026 global irony.
Keep this timeline in the back of your head as we go forward, because it serves as the spine of our explainer. What we're really tracking here is China's escalating agency over the decades. We move from 1899, where the door is forced open by outside powers, to 1978, where the door is consciously opened from within, all the way to 2026. And in 2026, Beijing isn't just opening the door, they're actively redesigning the architecture of the door itself.
All right, let's jump into era number 1, the first opening in 1899, or, as it's often called, imperialism on the cheap.
So picture this. It's the turn of the 20th century. China, under the Qing dynasty, completely lacks geopolitical agency. European powers and Japan are aggressively establishing these exclusive spheres of influence, and there was this very real, widespread fear that China was going to be, as the quote goes, carved like a melon. It was this chaotic scramble, which our very scattered macaroni animation here captures perfectly, where colonial powers were just desperately trying to grab a piece of the pie.
And this brings us to the U.S. solution. In 1899, U.S. Secretary of State John Hay dispatched what became known as the Open Door Notes. Now, it's absolutely crucial to get the context right here. Hay wasn't sending these out of the kindness of his heart to save China. No, he sent them to prevent China from being completely carved into formal colonies purely so American merchants could ensure they still had equal access to Chinese markets. And the most glaring fact in all of this, China was literally never consulted. The original open door was entirely designed and implemented by foreign powers strictly for foreign benefit.
And this brilliantly illustrates a core law of history, doesn't it? Forced actions create violent reactions. Because China wasn't consulted, this forced opening allowed foreign influence to completely flood the country. And that triggered a massive blowback, the Boxer Rebellion in 1899. It was a violent, deeply nationalist uprising against what the locals called foreign devils. The forced opening didn't bring harmony. It ultimately led to absolute chaos and bloodshed.
Which brings us to our second era, the Deng Revolution in 1978.
Fast forward almost 80 years. After decades of Maoist isolation, China was in a really tough spot, deeply impoverished. But the new leader, Deng Xiaoping, had a stark, pragmatic realization. To be backward is to be beaten. Notice how our noodle art here shifts to these simple, industrious sketches? That represents Deng's strategy. He realized he needed to break the cycle of poverty and isolation, so he opened the door, but this time on his own terms. He created special economic zones in cities like Shenzhen, opening them up to foreign investment and technology. This was the spark that eventually transformed China into the legendary factory of the world.
And you guys, the sheer scale of the human impact here is just staggering. 800 million. That is the number of people lifted out of poverty in just 40 years thanks to the strategic opening. Think about that for a second. It's a demographic and economic achievement that totally reshaped the entire global workforce.
To firmly anchor us in the real, tangible economic stakes of Deng's policies, let's just look at this comparison. Pre-1978, China's GDP per capita was hovering around just $300, but post-revolution, that number skyrocketed to over $12,000. The door was opened from within, and the resulting economic explosion laid the actual foundation for the modern superpower we see today.
Now let's step into the present and the near future. Part 3, the third wave, 2026.
Entering 2026, we are in a highly digital, deeply complex, and very assertive era, which is exactly why our visuals have shifted to these intricate mosaics. The door isn't just open anymore, they are actively redesigning it. Beijing's modern strategy really relies on three main pillars: institutional opening, the visa-free offensive, and AI and digital trade.
So, the crucial point is this idea of institutional opening. China is focusing on what they call high-level opening. They're actively slashing negative lists for foreign investment. Basically, this means they're allowing foreign money into sensitive sectors that used to be locked down tight. We're talking biotechnology, telecommunications, and even permitting wholly foreign-owned hospitals. It's a massive shift toward opening the service-oriented parts of their economy.
The second pillar is what we can call the visa-free offensive. Right now, there's a very prominent de-risking narrative coming from Western nations, a general push to separate supply chains from China. Well, to counter this, China is actively inviting the world in. They've massively expanded their unilateral visa-free regime to over 50 countries, including places like the UK and Canada. It's a fascinating diplomatic strategy to watch unfold.
In the third pillar, this represents the biggest shift of all: AI and digital trade. Think about it. While the 1899 policy was all about physical goods, trading silk and tea, the 2026 policy is entirely about data and AI. China is pushing for global cooperation by spearheading groups like the World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization, and they're promoting their own AI models like DeepSeek globally.
Which perfectly sets up our final section. Part 4, the 2026 Global Irony. A complete reversal of roles.
Let's move to this table and see how this builds. Because when you look at the entire century-long scope of this policy, a stark shift in agency emerges. In 1899, the United States forced the door open just for equal trade. In 1978, China consciously opened its own door for the purpose of getting rich through manufacturing. And now, in 2026, China is pushing the door even wider to become powerful, taking the lead in tech and digital sectors on their own terms.
And here is the ultimate climax, the great historical irony of it all. On one side, back in 1899, the U.S. fought aggressively to keep China's doors open to the world, demanding access. But today, in 2026, we see many in the U.S. debating closing their own doors to Chinese tech, stepping back from integration. Meanwhile, China is the one unilaterally opening its borders, expanding visas, and pushing AI cooperation to prove it's the indispensable hub of global connectivity. The roles haven't just shifted, they've completely swapped.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to think about. As China redesigns the doorway to the future, who is actually locking themselves in? It's an incredible shift in historical momentum, and honestly, a perfect reminder of why understanding our past is the absolutely best way to decode our present. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep asking questions, and I will see you next time.